Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed that little intro. I think that was a great little song, actually. Thanks so much for joining this conversation on acquiring energy efficiency as a resource. And thank you to ACEEE for hosting us here today. Before we begin, I'd like to just personally and respectfully acknowledge that I'm grateful to live, work, learn, and play on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples here in Toronto, Canada. We'll do a quick welcome and introduction of our panelists, and then we'll have about 40 minutes for three really interesting presentations that I'm looking forward to our panelists delivering today, followed by time for Q&A. If you have questions throughout, please do drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring, and I'll be able to direct those to our speakers. So I will just quickly share a little introduction slide of our speakers today. So joining us today, we have Kaylee D'Amico. Kaylee is the Marketing, Education, and Outreach Specialist at the California Hub for Energy Efficiency Financing and supports the Go Green Financing Program, which she'll talk about today, and is located in Sacramento, California. Rob Harmon is the Executive Director of the MEETS Coalition, located just outside of Seattle. And Lauren Seymour is the Program Manager with the Energy Coalition, also located in Sacramento. I am James Henry, Director of Growth and Sustainability at MyHeat, an energy efficiency software startup focusing on supercharging utility efficiency programs. So again, thanks for joining us. Before we get started with our first speaker, which will be Rob Harmon, I'll quickly introduce Rob in a little bit more detail before passing over. So Rob has worked on clean energy issues for over 30 years, creating practical, scalable alternatives to outdated, entrenched transaction structures. And he'll dive more into that today and unpack some of those words, particularly the one like entrenched. Rob now serves as the Executive Director of the MEETS Coalition after closing the first 20-year metered energy efficiency transaction. Essentially a power purchase agreement for energy efficiency, which solves the really tricky and difficult split incentive challenge and other difficult energy efficiency problems. Previously, he served for 10 years as the Chief Innovation Officer for the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, where he launched the first carbon calculator on the internet, Close History's first retail renewable energy certificate REC transaction, and launched a water restoration certificate business, which is the topic of his 2010 TED Talk. So very excited to kick things off with Rob. So Rob, over to you to present your screen and presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, folks. It's great to be here. Just checking, can everybody see my screen? Yes? Okay. So I'm here to talk to you a bit about MEETS, which is the Metered Energy Efficiency Transaction Structure, and the idea of treating buildings as grid and climate assets by turning savings into cash flow. So I want to let you know that energy efficiency at depth, which has been so challenging in the past, is now happening. Seattle City Light has launched a MEETS-based program called Energy Efficiency as a Service. They're currently reviewing applications for that program, and what's coming in is existing commercial office buildings offering 30 to 40% retrofit depth, and new passive house standard multifamily housing that's 40% better than code and is all electric. It appears that MEETS will cover about 40% of the cost differential for building passive house in Seattle. So interestingly, this I think will surprise people, the procurement that City Light has for MEETS offers no incentives, no payments for grid services, no payments for carbon benefits, and no credit enhancement. So who's paying for all this? Well, let me walk you through how MEETS works. So let's focus on a commercial building. We replace the role of the ESCO with what we call an energy tenant. They have a long-term rental agreement with the building owner to harvest and sell metered energy efficiency. So they receive capital from an investor, which is used to pay for and maintain the improvements in the building the same way an ESCO might. The energy tenant also pays the building owner rent for the use of the building. You can think about that like renting the roof for solar or something like that. But in this case, they're renting the building for the use of harvesting energy efficiency. The building owner, because the investor is providing the capital, has a more comfortable and valuable building without paying for that. The utility is key to the MEETS transaction. What the utility does is to read a dynamic baseline meter. It's not a static baseline meter, it's a dynamic baseline meter. And that meter reads the efficiency generated in the building, and the utility pays for that efficiency by paying the energy tenant over a long-term contract for the efficiency generated in the building and read by the meter. That revenue stream from the utility is what repays the investor their capital and continues to pay for the maintenance in the building. The utility then places the efficiency on the bill as energy along with the grid energy. So the building owner is now paying for both the grid energy provided from the grid and the efficiency energy provided from the building. So they are essentially paying the dynamic baseline meter reading, not simply the grid energy reading. So for the utility, the benefit is that they maintain their unit sales and their gross revenues because they've replaced grid units with efficiency units from the building. The tenants have a more comfortable and highly productive building, and all they need to do is continue to pay, the utility bills, including the metered energy efficiency. So they pay the bills they would have paid otherwise, but they get a better building at the same price they got the worst building for. So the main critique I hear often about this is that the tenants' bills don't go down. So I want to address that directly, and I want to do a little physics lesson here. The first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy, says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be transferred or changed from one form to another. So if you think about the energy in coal and gas, it is in the ground. They are to be had, and it's really the harvesting of that and getting it to the customer that you pay for. And the wind and solar, of course, are in the atmosphere and the sky. They are free except for the cost of harvesting them. So those things already exist. The energy in those already exist. And this is the important point, that the charges on one's utility bill are actually for capital and O&M expenses associated with harvesting those. So we shouldn't pretend that we're paying for energy there. What we're paying for is the capital and O&M expenses upstream on the grid. That includes renting money, that means finance, it means buying stuff, and it means paying for people. Those are the fundamental things one pays for on one's energy bill. So if energy bills are payments for capital and O&M, which they are, currently tenants in, let's say, a commercial building are paying for delivering those services, capital and O&M, from the grid. And their energy services are usually poor to average. Under MEETS, the tenants pay for delivering energy services from energy efficiency in their own building. So they are still capital and O&M expenses associated with harvesting efficiency, as opposed to capital and O&M expenses on the grid. Their energy services are improved significantly. So as I said earlier, they get a better building for free. I would point out that, in my opinion at least, we certainly want to give building owners the choice between investments in the grid or investments in their own building if both of those provide energy services. So that's what MEETS does. The other important thing here for getting energy efficiency to scale is putting it on the bill, and putting it on the bill as energy. That addresses multiple hurdles. One is the building owner versus tenant split incentive. So the tenant's bills don't go down, which provides the cash flow to make the whole fix of the building cost effective. Putting it on the bill also addresses change in the building ownership, because the utility bills continue past the first owner of the building. It addresses, as I said earlier, the lost unit sales for the utility. It addresses another vexing issue, which is creditworthy counterparties. If the utility is the buyer and the seller of the efficiency, then they are the counterparty for the energy tenant, the developer of the project. That helps significantly with long-term contracting and with the cost of finance. And the other thing that's important here is long-term pay for performance, and I'll get into that in some detail in a minute. So the other interesting thing about this is if you can monetize the building benefits on the bill, you can maximize our grid and climate benefits. If you combine those building cash flows with long-term payments for grid services. So much of the conversation about energy efficiency as a resource is about the utilities and the grid paying for grid services as a resource. If you combine those long-term payments for grid services with long-term payments for MEETs, you have a very potent combination to get deep in the building. Those two things function as force multipliers. The more revenue you have from energy efficiency, the more demand response you can do. The more demand response revenue you have, the more energy efficiency you can do. That will significantly increase the depth we can achieve in buildings, the grid benefits, the climate benefits, potentially electrification benefits. So very useful to have this force multiplier. How do we get there? I'm almost done here. In my view, the missing elements for EE at scale, to be understood, you have to understand how we got all the other energy sources that we use other than efficiency to scale. And there were two ways we financed all those power plants. One was utility ownership, particularly with the nukes and the coal plants of the early days. And then later with long-term PPAs for wind and solar. So those are the two ways the utility system has managed to get energy resources to scale. In my view, I may be wrong about this, it's unlikely that stakeholders will want utilities to own assets behind the meter as they do nuclear power plants, et cetera. So if I'm right about that, then that leaves us with long-term PPAs, particularly in larger buildings, to get us to scale. So the key elements of those long-term PPAs, and we shouldn't expect the market to scale without them, are pay for performance. And I want to point this out, only performance creates the actual grid and carbon benefits, right? We're not going to get performance unless we pay for it. Simply paying for finance doesn't guarantee you performance. And what the atmosphere and the grid need is performance. The atmosphere and the grid don't care much about the equipment you put in the building. They care about whether the equipment operates. So that's performance, and I don't believe you're going to get performance unless you pay for it. You also need creditworthy counterparties. I think this is another essential piece to focus on. We can't rely on the building owners to finance the project, and we can't rely on them to be the long-term counterparty for the building, for the contracts. They simply flip buildings too rapidly. So in closing, as I said, MEETs is underway in Seattle. We're seeing very significant depth that can be achieved using just the MEETs portion of the show. The incentives are not required. Combining MEETs with long-term pay for performance for grid services would create significant grid and climate benefits. So that's what I have. Thank you very much for the time, and I'm happy to answer questions. I think we're going to do those at the end.
Thanks so much, Rob. I love that concept, that topic. I mean, 40%, I think you quoted 40% depth without incentive is phenomenal. And as someone who also works in the energy efficiency industry, I mean, long-term PPAs for energy efficiency is also really, really interesting. So I'm looking forward to asking my own questions for you at the end. But as a quick reminder, for anyone who has any questions for Rob, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. There's a little reminder on screen right there. And we can be sure to address those at the end. But thanks again, Rob. That's really interesting stuff. So thank you. Up next, we have Lauren Seymour. So Lauren is a program manager with the Energy Coalition and oversees the implementation of public agency energy efficiency projects through the SoCal REN public agency programs. She also reviews energy policy impacts for those programs. Lauren previously worked as an energy industry research specialist and was an energy fellow at the U.S. Department of Energy. She has a master's in public affairs with a focus on energy policy from University of Texas, Austin, and a BA in international affairs and Spanish from the University of Nevada, Reno. So Lauren, over to you.
Great. Thank you, James. Let me share my screen. All right, can everyone, there they go, my slides, perfect. So hi everyone, like James mentioned, my name is Lauren Seymour and I'm a program manager for the Southern California Regional Energy Network, or SoCalREN for short. I'm presenting today from the Sacramento area on traditional Nisenan land. And I'll be speaking to one of our programs specifically for public agencies, which is the Metered Savings Program. And it's part of a portfolio of programs administered by the County of Los Angeles. So I will begin with the so what. Since its launch in 2019, the Metered Savings Program has achieved deep energy savings by addressing some of the challenges that are commonly faced by the public sector. And so projects have an average of 36% savings at the meter, and that is without any rebates or any incentives. And you can see by the savings metrics here that since the program's launch, we're seeing and anticipate to continue to see increased savings year over year. We have about 2.5 million kWh in savings expected by the end of this year, and a project pipeline for next year of over 3.5 million kWh and 1,000 in kW. Gas savings have been harder to come by just due to the nature of the types of projects we generally see with our public agencies. There's just not a whole lot of opportunity for gas savings under this program model, kind of with the sector that we're working with. The program was created for public agencies with them in mind, and it's administered by a public agency, the County of Los Angeles. It's a ratepayer-funded program and is a non-investor-owned utility resource program. So what that means is, as a resource program, energy efficiency savings from these projects contribute to not only the SoCalREN public sector goals, but also to the statewide energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction goals. So now I will kind of take a step back and provide a quick overview of what the SoCalREN is. So in 2012, the California Public Utilities Commission authorized the SoCalREN under the administration of the County of Los Angeles. And they authorized it to design and deliver programs with the objective of harnessing the collective power of Southern California's residents, businesses, and public agencies to achieve energy savings results and contribute to the collective statewide goals. So under the SoCalREN portfolio, there are various different programs, which you can see here, but today we'll just be focusing on the public sector. And all of SoCalREN's resources and direct services are provided to participants free of charge. And that's because the programs are ratepayer funded and they're considered public purpose programs under the purview of the California Public Utilities Commission. So there are over 700 agencies within the 12 counties that are shaded here on this map who are eligible to enroll in these public sector programs. And we serve customers in the Southern California Edison and SoCalGas territories. The programs work closely with agencies to develop energy efficiency and distributed energy resource strategies and projects to contribute to those statewide goals. There's a variety of different types of agencies we work with. So K through 12 school districts, special districts such as sanitation districts, cities, counties, water, wastewater districts, etc. So now I'll focus on the metered savings program itself. It is, like it sounds, a meter-based approach to achieve energy savings. So the program uses normalized metered energy consumption, or NMEC, to measure energy savings at the meter. And this allows agencies to pursue project opportunities with deeper savings that go beyond traditional utility incentive eligible measures that are oftentimes only incentivized above code. So essentially, we look at energy use at the meter, kind of pre and post project implementation, to see the savings resulting from the project, and then we normalize those savings using site-specific weather data. The best candidates for this approach are generally sites that have a predictable energy load and that we expect will save 10% or more from the project that's being implemented. And the program determines eligibility based on energy savings measured at the meter, regardless of which measures the agency chooses to implement to achieve the savings. So, for example, a city hall might replace a chiller, do some retro-commissioning on their HVAC units, install new LED lighting. We really don't mind how they get there as long as they are realizing those savings. And so this allows us to access those what would otherwise be considered stranded savings for eligible projects. And it lets us focus on the project as a whole rather than on the measure level or based on code. And the program acts as a one-stop shop for projects from start to finish, offering technical, procurement, and financial services, again, at no cost to the public agency. And so the program enables persistent energy savings also through ongoing support aimed to empower facility staff to track and manage their reduction goals. And some examples of support that we offer includes post-implementation training. We do measurement and verification support. We can also support staff with maintenance plan development for the equipment. And then we also do energy tracking through quarterly savings reports based on that meter data. So previously, we would estimate savings based on engineering calculations, but this way we can actually see what those savings are and track their persistence over time. I will say, because the program is meter-based, it has definitely been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many public facilities closed at the beginning of the pandemic, and many have still not returned to full operation or may never return to full operation as they were prior to March of 2020. So for example, a facility's regular energy use now may look like what we would have previously expected at the site on a weekend. So this creates a reduction in the energy consumption shown on the meter that is not related to any efficiency projects at the site. And so we have to account for that impact on energy use and savings of the building changes that are unrelated to any projects. So depending on when COVID hit in relation to the project's life cycle and timeline, there are approaches that can be taken to account for and address those impacts from COVID. So depending whether COVID hit pre, during, or post project implementation, there are different ways to kind of account for that. And there are many people much smarter than I am working on that to put together kind of a set standard, industry accepted standard for how to deal with COVID. So the overarching goal of the program is to really reduce the complexity for public agencies and achieve deeper energy savings as quickly as possible, so those agencies can realize the energy and cost savings sooner. Unlike other IOU NMEC programs, the Metered Savings Program does not provide customers with rebates or incentives, but it does address technical support barriers that are commonly faced by public agencies. Like I mentioned, we aim to be a one-stop shop for public agencies, as well as an extension of their staff to help address some of the resource and technical expertise shortages and challenges that many of them face. Our services cover the entire project lifecycle from project identification. It includes investment grade energy audits, procurement support, project financial analysis, and it looks like financing got a little messed up here. And then also construction management and closeout of the project. And although we do not offer any incentives, we do help connect agencies to apply for other non-utility financing options, such as the California Energy Commission's Energy Conservation Assistance Act, or ECA loan. And such offerings can further help reduce the complexity for public agencies and allow for deeper energy savings and expedited project completion. After the project is installed, we help agencies track the persistence of savings, like I mentioned, to show the energy savings actually realized on the meter after installation. And this allows agencies to track their progress, and they can even kind of adjust as needed over time. We're finding that agencies are choosing this program not only over other IOU NMEC programs that follow the same meter-based approach, but also offer incentives. But agencies are also choosing it over conventional, deemed, and calculated approaches that historically have made up the majority of traditional utility programs for the public sector. And for many of the agencies we work with, the cost of delay is a driving factor in this decision. And the time and money that they save by implementing these projects quickly with technical assistance is more valuable to them than the potential incentive money offered through the utility program. So we've seen success in this program model to date, and we look forward to continuing to provide the support to public agencies to continue realizing deep energy efficiency savings. And thank you. Happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks so much, Lauren. That was really great. I'm really impressed again about the sort of savings that have been achieved again without incentives. So I think Rob was in the region of 40%, in your project you're citing around 36%. So it's planting a question in my mind to ask of all of you when we get to the end. But really great, and I love that idea of a holistic one-stop shop to provide all the support that the public agencies need. Hopefully, as more places are sort of reopening and more folks are going back into these spaces, your programs will see an increased uptake again. That would be a great end result, I think. So thanks again, Lauren. So folks, if you have any questions for Lauren or related to anything that she covered, please go ahead, drop those in the chat. We do have a question that's come in. We'll tackle that at the end. We'll pass over now to Kaylee D'Amico. So Kaylee serves as the Marketing, Education, and Outreach Specialist at the California Hub for Energy Efficiency Financing, or CHIEF, a program at the California Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority, the acronym for which is CAEA-TFA. Kaylee will have to let us know if there's a way to pronounce that smoothly, in the California State Treasurer's Office. She manages public awareness efforts for 3 statewide energy efficiency financing programs in the residential, small business, and affordable multifamily sectors, working closely with utilities and other stakeholders to promote financing options. The program that she'll touch on a little bit today, the Go Green Home Energy Financing Program, is the oldest of 3 and has facilitated financing for over 1,500 projects with a total financed amount of $26 million. So very excited for Kaylee to dive in a little bit deeper. So if you're ready, Kaylee, over to you.
Thank you, James. I hope everyone's doing well today. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Kaylee, and I work for the California Hub for Energy Efficiency Financing, or the CHIEF. And I'm excited to chat with you all today about our residential financing program. So to start off, I wanted to share just a little bit about our organization. So the Chief is a state program in California that leverages private capital to facilitate attractive financing options for behind-the-meter improvements. Essentially, the way this works is that a customer will apply for financing from one of our participating lenders and then complete their project using an approved contractor from our network. And we serve as the program administrator kind of behind the scenes, facilitating the mechanisms that make this program work. We support energy efficiency retrofits in 3 programs, as James mentioned, in the residential, commercial, and affordable multifamily sectors. Today, we're going to be focusing on our residential program specifically. At the end of the day, the goal of these programs is to work towards eliminating the financing barrier that customers face when making energy upgrades while contributing to California's climate and energy savings goals, specifically the goal to double energy efficiency in existing buildings by 2030. Just to give you a brief sense of how the Chief is situated, the program was created by the California Public Utilities Commission, which then authorized the California Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority, the acronym is CATFA, James, to administer the program. And CATFA is an agency of the California State Treasurer's Office. So obviously there's a lot of different agencies involved. So to help customers navigate all of this, the Chief uses a public-facing platform called Go Green Financing to market the 3 programs. And those programs are known as Go Green Home Energy Financing, Go Green Business Energy Financing, and Go Green Affordable Multifamily Energy Financing. So moving right along here, I want to cover some initial data and outcomes from Go Green Home, which we're going to be focusing on today in this presentation. The program serves owners and renters of several different residential property types, and financing is currently available up to $50,000 per project, with terms out to 15 years and rates between roughly 3% and 8%. We also recently launched an online microlending option for appliance purchases, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. To summarize a couple of the key features of Go Green Home, first, customers do not have to use their property as collateral for these loans. Financing is available for more than 50 eligible energy efficiency measures, including decarbonization measures. And the program provides some flexibility to include non-energy measures within the same loan as well. We're also equipped to offer other types of financing products, so things like leases and energy service agreements. And then transitioning to outcomes, I won't go through all of that part of the slide in detail, but wanted to point out that as the end of the 3rd quarter, we've enrolled over 1,500 loans, actually 1,600 as of the last week or so, with a total financed amount of more than $26 million. And we currently have a network of over 500 contractors installing projects throughout the state. So diving a little bit more deeply now into how this program works, how we leverage private capital, and why this is a good option for customers. The program uses a credit enhancement mechanism to leverage private capital for energy upgrades, which mitigates risk for lenders and enables them to offer better rates and terms for their loans through the program. Finance companies offer rates for Go Green Home loans that are up to 15% lower than their signature market rate products. And they also extend payback terms out to 15 years, which significantly reduces monthly payments for the borrower. Our lenders also broaden their approval criteria, with many of them lowering their minimum credit score for loan eligibility to 580. It's also important to note that this not only makes financing more appealing than market rate options to customers, but it's often the difference between a project being possible for them to complete or not at all. I'm going to take some time to focus in on the credit enhancement to demonstrate what these benefits look like for borrowers in practice. The table on the right here on this slide is a direct interest rate comparison between what a borrower with a term length of 5 years or less gets from Go Green Home versus the same lender's signature product. So on average, the interest rate is 4.9% with Go Green Home, which is more than 6% lower than the rate that the same lender would have offered the same borrower for the same loan without the program. So this results in more than $2,000 in cumulative interest saved on these loans. And then if you look at the other table on the slide, you'll see that 25% of the loans enrolled have been made to borrowers with credit scores below 700, which demonstrates the improved approval criteria that's offered through the program. So circling back to a point that I made a little bit earlier, which is that Go Green Home helps make projects feasible and possible for borrowers to consider. The next two slides are going to demonstrate what I mean by that. The extended terms that are offered by lenders through Go Green Home significantly reduce the borrower's monthly payment. So most lenders will only go out to a 5-year term on the open market, but they'll go out to 15 years with our loan product. On this table, you can see a comparison between the monthly payments of a Go Green Home loan with a term longer than 5 years and the monthly payments on the loan that the same borrower would have gotten from the same lender if they had been limited to their standard 5-year product. So for the average borrower in this scenario, Go Green Home results in a monthly payment reduction of over $200 a month. And they're not just saving money either. For many borrowers, a high monthly payment is a significant barrier to financing an energy upgrade. So these reduced payments often make the difference between doing the project at all or not. To tie all this together, I'm going to walk through a sample project and financing breakdown for a typical Go Green Home borrower. So let's say in this scenario, Bill, the borrower, wants to install a heat pump HVAC at his home. His contractor tells them that in order to install the HVAC, he also needs to upgrade his electric panel to accommodate it, which in this circumstance, the program would consider to be part of the 70% of each loan that needs to be spent on eligible energy efficiency measures because it's practically required in order to install the heat pump itself. Bill also wants to do some landscaping just for fun, which he can include in this loan as well, because non-energy measures can comprise up to 30% of a Go Green Home loan. So his total project cost is a little over $15,000 and he wants to finance that amount. So let's now look at Bill's financing options. These are real rates and terms offered by one of our participating lenders, both with and without Go Green Home. So assuming that Bill's credit score is below 640, without the program, he'd be offered an interest rate of over 20% and a term length of 5 years from this lender, which would make his monthly payment more than $400 a month. But with Go Green Home, Bill would receive a rate of 6.38% with his credit score, and then he could also extend his payback term up to 15 years, which means his payment only ends up being about $130 a month. So by using Go Green Home, Bill gets to install his project exactly the way he wanted to, and his monthly payments are $284 a month lower than what they might have been otherwise. So transitioning here, I think it's important to recognize that borrowers do have other financing options open to them for their energy upgrade, and that there are situations in which some may make more sense to use than others. PACE is a national energy financing program that uses a property lien and tax bill payments to finance energy upgrades, which works well for borrowers who want really long payback terms or to install measures like solar and distributed generation. But the use of the property lien can expose borrowers in that situation to risk and also make it more difficult to sell the home over time. Credit cards and personal loans are another financing option, which helps when the borrower wants to have significant flexibility for their project, but they come with higher interest rates and short terms. And Go Green Home is great for borrowers who want to access better rates and terms on an unsecured loan product, but debt-based financing is not always suitable for borrowers. Continuing on that thread, I want to acknowledge where we're at in serving the underserved through Go Green Home. The program is designed to meet the needs of low to moderate income and low credit borrowers, and we offer a higher credit enhancement to lenders who make loans to these customers. And debt-based financing can actually work well for LMI borrowers, but they have to have adequate cash flow to repay those loans. We've had some success in reaching LMI borrowers through this program. Over half of our loans enrolled have been made to upgrade properties in LMI census tracts, but our numbers are lower for reaching borrowers with low credit scores and those living in disadvantaged communities. I think we're always on the program design side striving to serve more underserved borrowers through these programs, but I also think it's important to recognize that financing does not replace low or no income programs and that it's not intended to be a replacement for other options that may be a better fit for some customers. With my last couple minutes here, I just want to talk about some of our more recent innovations and opportunities on the horizon. As I mentioned earlier, we recently launched a microlending option that supports appliance purchases made through online utility marketplaces in California. So the financing is offered instantly at the point of sale, and it offers broader approval criteria and lower rates than other financing options often considered by customers in these circumstances, like credit cards. We also just launched this financing last month in one utility in Southern California. So far, about 25 loans have been enrolled to primarily underserved customers through that program. And then we have more loans expected to come and more utilities coming on board to offer this product soon. And finally, thinking ahead to the future, we're excited to continue expanding our programs to new audiences and financing models. Recently, we received approval to incorporate new funding sources into the programs. Historically, we've only used ratepayer funds from the 4 investor-owned utility in the state, similar to SoCal REN. So we're looking forward to using this approval to seek non-investor-owned utility funding sources, and then start offering the programs to POU and muni customers. We're also looking into other types of financing models and private capital sources that can be leveraged for the programs. So something like a single originator model where one party screens projects and approves applications and then sells those loans to a purchaser. We also recently updated our program regulations and are now ready to offer financing options like leases, equipment finance agreements, and service agreements through Go Green Home. And finally, we're continuing to seek opportunities to partner with utility program implementers to better connect financing options with consumer education and incentive programs. Thanks very much for your time today. I'm looking forward to the Q&A, and you're also welcome to reach out to me via email with any follow-up questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kaylee. That was super. So I think what we've just heard as a quick summary from all of our speakers, Rob highlighted various ways the MEETS program can acquire energy efficiency while solving for tricky issues like split incentives. Also gave us a quick physics lesson. Lauren walked us through acquiring energy efficiency with holistic supports for public agencies, acting as a one-stop shop. And Kaylee just bringing us up to speed on how to unlock energy efficiency with various innovative financing issues. So really a well-rounded look at some great programs and approaches for acquiring significant energy efficiency savings in different ways. So thank you, everyone. We have just about 15 minutes for Q&A in this platform. If there are additional questions, we have a follow-on room in a Zoom room, which you should have received a link to. But we'll get going into the Q&A now. So we're going to start with Rob. So Rob, I had a question for you, which mirrors a question that we got in the chat from Marco, which was that the program you described, the MEETS program, the savings you achieved, it seems great. So, what is preventing more utilities and more regions from adopting this approach? And Marco had mentioned, you having mentioned Seattle City Light. What about PSE, Snowpud, Tacoma Power? What are those barriers, and what might already be underway to increase where kind of MEETS is active?
Well, I don't think I'd get much disagreement from folks in the energy sector that the utility industry and its participants tend to move slower than Tesla does. So part of this is just the inertia of large institutions. So that's true of all large institutions, and institutions are large for a reason. So I don't mean to place blame. It's where we are. The other utilities in the region, I've spoken to Puget about this, and they are watching Seattle City Light's program very carefully. We'll see what they do. They've also had some leadership changes there that we'll see how those play out. We have a lot of horsepower right now in New York. We have horsepower in other places that I'm not currently at liberty to talk about. And so we are seeing other utilities pick this up. I think what's happened historically is that folks waited to see how Seattle City Light's program would go. So we're now seeing those applications come in, and we're seeing a lot more interest from other utilities. I think as the projects themselves roll out, we'll see more interest from the large commercial real estate community, which also tends to move slowly and be, in many cases, sort of herd following, right? So very few people. What's the cliche? The pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land, right? And I think the other one is, in this industry, very few people want to be first, and most people don't even want to be second, right? And everybody wants to be third, right? So that they're not risking. Most utilities aren't paid to take risks, right? And most utilities employees aren't paid to take risks. So anything new, it's often easier to move slowly. And I'm not sure, as the father of a 10-year-old boy, I'm not sure we have time to move slowly anymore, but that's a topic for another day, I guess.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think any large organization, no matter the sector, has a tendency to move slow. What accelerates movement and accelerates adoption of new programs, new approaches is proven success, is case studies, is, like you said, watching someone's program and seeing how it performs. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. I do agree we're maybe running out of time, and we need to move more quickly, but we could probably have, again, a whole other conversation about innovation in large organizations and how to foster that and accelerate things. But for another time.
I think that there's a good argument to make that the risks of moving slowly are now larger than the risks of moving rapidly.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Rob. One other question for you while we have you in the hot seat, but Kaylee and Lauren, feel free to jump in on any questions. Likewise for all panelists here. In your presentation, you likened the MEETS program or described it as an energy efficiency PPA, and this got me really excited. Given the recent interest and adoption by various large corporations, as we just discussed, but particularly with their interest in purchasing renewable energy PPAs to offset their emissions, meet reduction goals. Do you see a future where energy efficiency PPAs can serve a similar purpose, can be as attractive to large corporates as a renewable energy PPA and as they are today?
Oh, I think they can be more attractive than a renewable energy PPA. The challenge, I actually have some experience with renewable energy PPAs, which I fully support. The challenges are often that they're virtual PPAs, right? The location of the project is different than the location of the node that the customer's on. So it's basically a hedging exercise, right? A lot of virtual PPAs are basically hedges because the electrons go where they're going to go. The benefit of an energy efficiency PPA is that the physical upgrades, the capital deployment is in your own building, right? So if you're a building owner, not only do you get the energy efficiency as the resource, but you get all that capital improvement in your own building. You're not paying for that capital improvement on somebody else's property, right? So, and you also have the benefits that it's not a hedging product, really. It's you're buying your energy efficiency, and depending on how the contracts are written, you can use it as a hedge if you want. But it's basically it's a product based in your own geography or in your own physical geography, right? Your own building rather than somebody else's geography. So that's going to reduce risks. And I think the other thing that it will do is it will help stabilize long-term exposure to fossil fuel price risk.
So lots of reasons to be hopeful for them to explode in popularity. I love it.
I think the challenge is going to be, what's the utility role in that energy efficiency PPA, right? Because if it's just an energy services agreement between the building owner and the ESCO, the utility's out of that transaction. They have no control over it. They have no optics into it. They're not metering it, right? If I were utilities, I would rather be in the transaction than watch it happen without me.
Yeah, great point. So we have a question in chat, but I'm going to just ask that person. So Maureen, if you could maybe let me know if that question was intended for a specific panelist, that would be great if you could just drop that in chat. If not, I'll put that to everyone. But just to give you a moment there, a question for Kaylee. So the Go Green Energy Financing Program, it looks great. Lots of great reasons for someone to get on board. I love that it's open to renters as well as owners. What kind of success has the program seen or not seen in moving the needle for those who rent? I think, we all know that that's a stickier part of the population to move. So, what kind of success or lack of success has the program seen with respect to renters?
Sure. So, to be completely honest, I think the kind of traditional loan structure that we have right now has not been super appealing to renters as is. We've seen the programs be used primarily for HVAC measures, for windows, for these kind of large scale, expensive home retrofits that just make more sense for homeowners to use. We did recently launch that micro lending option, which is specifically for appliances, things like, stovetops and other, materials like that. So I think that has a huge opportunity to reach renters and be more appropriate for them in a way that our kind of traditional loan structure and other kind of traditional financing programs and home improvement loans have not been accessible for renters. The other thing I would say about our programs is one thing we were very careful to implement in the program design was to make sure that not only traditional single family homes qualify. So we also allow manufactured homes and site-built mobile homes to qualify, as well as kind of small multifamily properties, condos, duplexes, townplexes. So there's a lot of different property types that qualify for the program. And so it's a little bit more flexible than other traditional loan programs might be. So to answer your question, definitely acknowledge that, this is not necessarily suitable for renters in the way that the program has been used, but we're hopeful that this new micro lending option would be a more suitable option and kind of bring that ability to finance these measures a little bit more close to home.
Yeah, super. It's funny how it's almost kind of the other side of the coin to Rob's presentation on MEETs and solving for that split incentive. And so we sort of, maybe we can get you two together to figure out what a MEET for a residential combined with micro lending would look like. I'd certainly love if that program was available here in Canada, and I'd be putting my landlord sending that over his way. But no, that's great. Thank you. So we have a comment and question from Maureen in the chat, and sort of open for everyone to respond, but says most likely relevant to Rob and Lauren's presentations. So the comment is, utilities are often held to a different baseline than the existing condition of a building. And so assuming we want to have these resources recognized in the electric system as a resource, what are your recommendations for reconciling different baselines? So maybe Lauren, if you'd like to kick us off.
Yeah, I can speak just to what we see for the public sector. Maureen, that's correct. Traditionally, many of the programs that we worked on and have implemented with utilities could only kind of claim those savings or provide services on savings that were above code, rather than from the existing conditions of the building. And so for public agencies, that doesn't really matter to them. They want to see the whole, all of the energy savings. And just because something is code, what we find is that does not mean that the majority of public sector agencies are actually doing that. We've seen some equipment that I'm shocked is still running, but an agency is not going to replace it if it's not broken most often. And so I would say a way to kind of reconcile that, there are some regulatory things that could make it easier in terms of the way that we kind of identify and calculate the savings for these projects. But yeah, I agree. And I hope that kind of the industry can continue shifting that way to more meter-based approaches, because the customers care about all of the savings on the bill, not just what's above code.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there are two issues there. One is a basic technology issue about how you establish a meter against various baselines. And that's really a technology issue that, I know how that gets done with the technology being used at the Bullitt Center in Seattle, where MEETs was first piloted. So I'm familiar with the fact that you can meter multiple baselines at a time at the utility against the utility meter. That's certainly within the purview of well-built metering technology. So I don't think you have a technical issue there. I would agree with Lauren that there are some policy issues that are very worth examining. One of the things I like about MEETs is that we don't use utility incentives. So since we don't use utility incentives, we're not asking the utility to pay incentives, which would create the potential for free ridership, right? There's no free rider here because the building's paying for its efficiency on its own bill. which is essentially sort of what Lauren is doing, right? So the building is keeping its efficiency because it's a public building, right? It doesn't have a split incentive, right? So I would echo Lauren's very thoughtful comment. I thought that the building owners don't care about the regulators and code baselines. They don't care about any of that. They care about capturing all the savings they can capture. And I would point out that that's what the grid cares about, and that's what the atmosphere cares about, right? It is, I think it is time for us to look seriously at the challenges that we create with utility policy that says you can't do anything to help anybody if it's already required by code. I think, Lauren, what I would add to your story is that one of the reasons people keep equipment running with duct tape and baling wire that should have been replaced a long time ago is that sometimes the requirements to bring things up to code make them so expensive that people don't feel like they have a choice, particularly if they have a split incentive, right? If I have a split incentive and you're going to make me buy something 3 times more expensive than I can afford and all the savings go to the tenants, why would I do that? I'd rather just keep it running the way it is. So I think there's a sort of a policy, what I would call an adult conversation that has to happen around whether we've outlived some of the usefulness of some of our policies when we're faced with a climate crisis and a budding grid crisis. And it's time to move on.
Thanks both. Kaylee, anything to add on that one?
I think Lauren and Rob covered it.
They did. That was wonderful. So, Lauren, a question for you. In your presentation, you talked about your agency sort of supporting lots of different end users and types of entities, but in your specifically, you talked about public agencies. So that alone can be a pretty broad category, I would say. So is there any particular type of public agency that's better suited for the program and the approach that you're taking? Have you seen greater success with certain types of agencies versus others?
Yeah, so generally the majority of the agencies, I would say, would either be kind of cities and counties or school districts. We've seen the most projects coming from there. And we're seeing mostly within those combination of lighting and HVAC. So lighting, mostly replacing lighting. And then for HVAC, it can be a combination of either replacing units or kind of retro commissioning or retuning of units, which can see some significant savings. The reason we don't see it so much with water wastewater agencies is because of the eligibility requirements that I kind of mentioned. We want predictable buildings with about 10% savings, and that just ensures that we can kind of determine or parse out the savings that we're seeing on the meter from the project versus something else. So with water wastewater districts, there can be large plants on one meter, so getting to 10% of their usage can be really difficult. And so that's why we're generally seeing more cities, counties, school districts, and looking at their facilities.
Super. Yeah, those are good insights. Not immediately obvious, but good to keep in mind. So we are about 15 seconds shy of our 1 hour. There are 2 additional comments in the chat, but just to let everyone know, we'll be jumping over to a separate Zoom screen. So that Zoom link is in the chat. So maybe just scroll back to a little earlier. We'll be jumping over there now. So for anyone who would like to follow over, ask any more questions, chat with the panelists, please do so. But thank you very much for joining us here today. Thank you again to ACEEE for hosting us, and thank you to our panelists for a great conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.